I'm Christian Chiller. Welcome to my podcast, an enthusiastic ramble through whatever has taken my interest the past week or so. Expect technology, games, history, travel, geekery, and as always, much, much more. Welcome everybody, welcome to another Chinchilla Squeaks. I have a few links for you first, and then an interview and a live demo with an old friend of mine and associate of mine, a collaborator of mine, John Davenport, talking about his new project that is doing a bunch of text summarization and natural language processing on conversations. We'll get to the interview there, but let's begin with some links. Of course, it would not be, I think I've said this several times, a tech podcast of the hour without some AI news. I just have a little bit for you this time. First is from MIT Technology Review, written by Tate Ryan Mosley. Takeaways from the European Union's new, I think, proposed AI Act. And this is, of course, something that lots of people are rushing, or government bodies, regulatory bodies are rushing to do at the moment to get ahead of the ever rapidly changing industry around artificial intelligence. And some interesting things here that are showing maybe they're a little more clued on, wised up. I think I've just made up two phrases there. Are some elements like no emotion recognition. I feel like this is already being used in some tools, but there we go. Social scoring. We don't really have that outside of certain countries in the world yet, I don't think. But there we go. I guess a lot of this is about removing potential bias from some of these models. And then more specifically, restrictions on generative AI. And this is mostly around copyrighted material. Some of these discussions initially led Sam Altman, CEO, I think, of OpenAI to threaten to withdraw from Europe and then change his mind. So it becomes interesting. I wonder when, the European Union is a large market, but it's an increasingly fussy, pedantic, regulated market. And a lot of American companies and from other places always threaten to pull out because of it. And I sometimes wonder when the effort of running business, the restrictions of running business, and I'm casting no judgment here on whether I agree with them or not, starts to outweigh the potential profits they can make. And I guess this is a decision that many of these companies make as they go through these processes. So that's some highlights from it. Go and have a read a little bit more detail of the document. It also has links to the actual report. Next, some really good posts over actually on the Ableton, which is music software made here in Berlin blog. No author is credited. It's a two-parter, AI and music making. Part 1 is the state of play. Part 2 is tomorrow is the question. They're both really good in detail posts looking at, yes, the state of play and tomorrow, what tools have come before, what tools are currently being used, what people have done with them, the issues around them, and what could happen next. Is it going to be music democratization? Is it going to be music dilution, however you want to put this? And it's actually some things that Killian and I touched upon on our In Bots We Trust show when we looked at music. And I've also looked at a few applications myself on my YouTube channel, looking at some of these similar aspects. And a lot of people always thought music would be sacred because it's very human. It's all about feeling. But I think the argument is that actually music is also quite mathematical and formulaic at heart. And actually there's been a lot of almost procedurally generated music if you kind of listen and look at it for many years. And now, like many, many things, AI is just the scale. And as with many other creative pursuits, it's not that it wasn't possible before, but now the sheer scale is obliterating those who genuinely want to be seen. And are those artists, the argument is that sort of threaded through both these posts is artists who put the effort, give something more unique, etc., will sit above all of this. But if there's more noise to combat against an industry that was already very difficult to be heard in, will it become even harder? And I think this is very similar across a lot of the other creative pursuits that AI is currently impacting. But really interesting 2 posts. There's a lot of links here of tools and things I would like to follow up in future videos too. So head on over to the Ableton blog and take a look. Next, this is, we're coming into more general tech here, more tech that I was used to cover before the past few months. This is over on Nordic API's blog by Jay Simpson. Back to the monolith. Why did Amazon dump microservices? And this is specifically Amazon Prime Video. Microservices has been this pattern that many people in the know have been telling everyone they need to move to. And, we're almost at this point now where the slow movers are doing it, to the point now where companies that started are already saying, actually, it didn't really work. We're switching back. And Amazon Video in this particular case did it. It did it because, actually, strangely, the microservices didn't scale very well and caused bottlenecks, which is precisely what microservices were supposed to prevent in the first place. And I think this is often some of the complexity with microservices over a monolith. You have lots of interweaving, interconnected parts, and implementing all of those, especially on something like video that needs to be very responsive, can be difficult, a challenge, not impossible, but a challenge. And I think interesting, one of their biggest competitors in this, who are Netflix, one of the biggest early proponents of microservices. So it's interesting to see that their rival is saying it doesn't work for video. Anyway, have a look at the post and see what you think. As always, you can head over to christianschiller.com and let me know through one of the various ways of contacting me what you think. Finally, in the kind of tech section, this is over on pdfa.org. It's been 30 years since PDF. PDF, the portable document format that remains still quite portable and still quite flexible and still very widely used, is 30 years old. Head on over to this post to get some highlights of its history, what it did then, what it does now, and the kind of use cases in both of these decades. And yeah, fascinating recent changes coming in macOS and other operating systems, showing that PDF is still very much alive and well and is still very portable. And I kind of love it, actually. Next, 2 final posts in the and finally section. One is from Jamie over on Stonemaier Games, who has an excellent board game production blog based around his experience with his equally excellent games. Let's talk about YouTube face and clickbait. This is something I have battled with myself, that you go to YouTube and it's full of these people pulling overly emotional and enthusiastic faces, or whatever the emotion may be, faces, trying to grab your attention. And I've kind of pulled away from it. A little bit of it has been because I lacked the time to go and finish doing all the screenshots, but also all the thumbnails, but also because I didn't really like it. I wanted to find better ways, and I've been trying to think of a way to engage people with a YouTube thumbnail that isn't that horrible kind of YouTube face. And it's really interesting to see this post and equally the comments discussing that, yeah, a lot of people are sick of it. But it's like many of these things, it's like clickbait titles and listicle titles. People complain about them, but people must still click them. Otherwise, we wouldn't keep doing them. Anyway, interesting discussion. And finally, over on Vice, your favorite bands are reuniting, but not for the reasons you think. We were recently in Dublin and saw Pulp, and Blur are playing, and many other bands. And this article goes into a lot of interesting details as someone who is a fan of some of these, but also played in the band over 20 years ago now. That actually never really split up, but anyway, about why some of the reasons might be. And it is a little bit about money, but it's also about how the industry has changed in those 30 years. 30 years ago, I don't know where I got 30 years from, but it's actually about right. And in the past 30 years, should we say, it varies, that the industry has changed so much that even bands who were big in those days, and also talking Oasis here, have kind of struggled to maintain a life afterwards. And actually their reunion shows are more popular than ever. In some cases, they're releasing new material, like Blur, for example, in this case. Some they're not. Some have had more success in these reunion times than they have in the first time. They're now playing to people my age, I suppose, who have money to actually watch these shows. And in some cases, the bands are going through a second lease of life. Pulp were very good. We saw Suede a few years ago when they reformed and they were still exceptional live. So I think that's kind of the key of the article, is if you have something to offer, something to add to what you did before, then it's worth reuniting. But don't just do it to flog a dead horse, as it were, I suppose is the statement. Anyway, head on over, take a look. Let me know what you think. If you follow my newsletter on Substack, you can do that in the comments there. Or yet again, head over to christociller.com and you can find many ways to get in touch with me. Next is my interview with John Davenport. It was part of a live demo as well. I kind of kept it all in, but there may be areas where he's explaining something that isn't completely obvious on the podcast, and you will be able to find maybe a day or so after the release of this podcast version, a version on my YouTube channel where you can see all of it. And I hope you enjoy the conversation and us sort of nerding out.
Today I'm joined by John Davenport, who we actually attempted to make a video recording a while back, but it kind of failed, and I don't think it ever saw the light of day. So this is actually something completely different from that topic. John and I have known each other on and off for a while. He still makes, I don't know, an awesome piece of software for automating screenshot generation that I am still desperately trying to open source for him, and am doing it just in the grand spirit of all of these things slowly. But he messaged me the other day and said, I've been hacking on this other really cool thing recently. Let me tell you about it. So it seemed like a fun setup. So John, why don't you jump into yourself and what you wanted to go through?
Yeah, so I'm John Davenport. I'm a aspiring software engineer. I'm an aspiring software entrepreneur. I've been working on stuff for about 7 years. I started teaching myself Python about 7 years ago. And I met Chris in 2019 when I was working on user docs. He is actually the first user I have ever had for anything that I developed ever. And I found him in Write the Docs, and him and another gentleman were talking about using Python to automate screenshot generation. So I was like, yes, these guys are my client base.
So I paid you nothing.
Paid me nothing. So me and Chris started talking, and before User Docs was the screenshot generation program, before it was ever a thing, we started talking about it, and I shipped a first version for him and this other gentleman, and it didn't work at all. And I went back, I made a second version that was a full desktop application, and it actually worked. It got the job done. Chris is the only person to actually implement screenshot automation with my software. Which was admittedly is actually very difficult, even with the software.
And where I was using it is sort of, I'm not there anymore, but I am trying to get it working for a new client. But we actually want to open source it as well. That's been one of the main things. I've been very, very, very slowly unpicking John's brain.
That is the idea. And it's even like, it's reasonably, I don't know, it's totally doable. And I still think, even though it was a total commercial failure, I still really think that it was and is a good idea.
No, it was a great idea, and it does still work quite well. In fact, just as well as some other commercial options out there, to be honest with you. And we will open source it. It's just quite complex. Slowly. But John, what have you been? You have something completely different you want to talk about, though, don't you?
So I moved on after User Docs, and just to be like, as part of this, I'm super passionate about shipping products that help technical writers, because so much of the success I have enjoyed in my career is either because I was doing some technical writing, or because I just learned something from a document that taught me how to do something really important. Just like all the software engineering stuff, I learned all that from technical documentation. So I have massive respect for the profession and the people who work there. And so I UserDocs was a commercial failure. I moved on to a second product called SME Interviews. And it was a little like, I don't know that you ever tried that one, but it's just like a Q&A app for technical, like it's called questions, answers, a chat thread per question. So you can you can ask questions, answer questions, and chat about it. And it also, like, nobody cared. I didn't get traction, and I failed it off. And fast forward to about February of this year, when I had always had this vision for SME interviews that I could somehow take like a recording or a transcript of a conversation and get from the content of that conversation to reasonable documentation, at least a first draft for a writer.
Yeah. Okay. And I assume I'm making some very big assumptions on the tools that have recently emerged that are helping you do this.
Yes. Because by using like the large language model APIs and a little bit of NLP, that goes from like an insurmountable challenge to something that's actually doable.
It's also interesting because there's a lot of these ideas that we discussed several years ago that just technically were not really probable at the time. I think one of them was like a doc spot, which is now very possible and is being widely implemented. And the second one was, I remember people endlessly saying, you'd go in a Telegram chat or a Slack chat several hours later and there'd be this massive conversation and people would say, I wish something could have summarized this for me. And now we kind of have it in some respects.
We have it.
Yeah. And a lot of I'm going to just keep the names generic because it gets boring hearing the old CGP one a lot.
We can go with Falcon or Llama if you want to be special.
I don't know. But, this aspect of like summarize this conversation, et cetera, has become something that is relatively straightforward for them now. So I'd be interested to see what you've added on top of that makes it more specific, but the NLP aspect as well. I think there's an aspect for me of, you can have a conversation with somebody to get their requirements, but then there's this aspect of what it is they say they want versus what it is they actually want. Expectations versus assumptions and all these sorts of things. So I don't know. Do you have something you want to I can hear you frantically tapping away. I think you have something you want to show, don't you?
I'm going to both talk about it and show it to you. So
cool.
So in February, I'm watching this like amazing media circus about artificial intelligence. Yeah. And like, it's something that I've been interested in since I was in college. And I was like, y'all, I know I'm late to the party, but I got to learn this. I got to learn it.
Yeah.
So even though I had like other irons in the fire, I was like, I'm going to build something with artificial intelligence and NLP. And I actually decided, because one of the things I did in the meantime, after I sort of took a hiatus from trying to write software after SME interviews, I started a cleaning business. And this cleaning business runs in Phoenix, Arizona. And I actually have a lady who runs the phones for me. I don't have to do the calls anymore. And we have a phone system called OpenPhone. Mm-hmm. And OpenPhone records all my conversations, and I have all my text messages in it. And I was like, here's what I want. I want to have a write-up of a case study about a clean that I did for a customer so I can put it on my website for SEO purposes.
Yep.
So I took in Python transcripts of call recordings and text messages and started feeding it into the OpenAI APIs to generate case studies. And it worked pretty well. So what I did was I stood up a service that took all the data from my phone system and put it into like a reasonable model. And that's the procedural part, right? It's an interesting thing as a developer writing using the generative APIs from OpenAI and other people is a completely different topic from procedural programming. Because in procedural programming, if you have a consistent output and a consistent method for a consistent input and a consistent method for processing that input, you will get a consistent output. But when you're working with generative API, you will have a consistent input and a consistent process for processing that input and an inconsistent output. So it makes it like a different world to work in. And so I was like, okay, I've got the procedural part hammered out pretty well. Now I have to work with the actual language stuff and the AI. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to work up a crappy script to teach myself this process. And so I was like, what better way to do it than to work on the SME interviews problem? Because I know it and I care about it and like I want to do something. So I took a transcript of a technical interview that I had at work and I started writing a script. And basically what the script would do is it would take this conversation, it would analyze the content of the conversation and figure out what the topics were in that conversation, and then write you summaries of those topics. And my intent was, my first try was, I just sent that list of topics along with some context into OpenAI. And I was like, write me an outline. And it did a terrible job. It was trash. And then I tried to feed that outline into another step that would then write the document. And reliably, the document was trash because the outline was trash. So my second cut there was to be like, take the conversation, slice it into topics, and then take this topic and slice it into topics. So that you could take the transcript, do topic analysis, and then do subtopic analysis to develop an outline that was to the level of detail that you need in the document. So, and that got me some pretty good results, and I was pretty happy with the output of it. And so I'm chucking along. I thought this other product was going to be a hit, and I, was working pretty furiously on it. And then I learned, and part of the reason why I'd done this mock-up is because I had an ISTC talk. And I was going to go and I wanted to have something to show at the ISTC talk. And I was like, this jams right into my objectives. I'll have this cool SME interviews thing I'll show. And I did it, had the talk. Nobody cared, which is common for me. And then I made a post on LinkedIn. And I was like, hey, I've got this script. This is what it does. If you want it, DM me. And so somebody did. And I was like, okay, if you want this, I will send you a $5 invoice on Stripe and you can pay it. So I sent him the invoice and he paid it. And I was like, yes, I just got my first $5 as a software entrepreneur. This is huge. So then I went and I got on the call with him and and the way it was literally, Chris, it was like Python Jupyter Notebooks. Elixir has Livebook. This was like a crappy Elixir Livebook script where you would hand write JSON in the outline to get a decent output out of it. And I was like, okay, let's go. So we got on an implementation call. I tried to get this script running on his computer and it was a total bust. Nothing worked. 30 minutes in, we just gave up and I was like, oh, I had to go back home with my tail between my legs.
Did you have to give him a refund?
Heck no, I got his money, buddy. I'm not giving him his money back. So I went and like I spent the entire weekend throwing the script behind an application. And then I went back at it the next Tuesday, and it was still broken and crashing. But the same day I got my second sale. Somebody paid me $20 for indefinite access to the tool that didn't even work.
Uh-oh.
So I had, I figured it out, right? Like why all the software sales guys sell shit that they don't have. This is why.
Yep.
So I set my implementation with that guy for Thursday, and I got in front of him, and by that time I had actually stabilized the product to, I got it to a point, and I showed it to him, and he liked it a lot. And, so that demo call went well. I've now had one good implementation call. I made my third sale this week, which was, I unfortunately under asked and only got $5 again, but I'm okay with this. So it's like a fortuitous moment to come on here and talk with you about this, because
let's hope we can get you 2 more sales.
That's right. I only need, I'm only going to let 5 licenses go at a flat rate, and then we're going to start charging monthly. It's because like you were my first user for all of the stuff that I have done. Like you were my first, fan, as it were. And it's just cool to be back on here talking with you about this when I've finally gotten somewhere.
Okay. Well, can you show me something, or could you show us something then?
Here is Discuss It, as we have named it. And what you're looking at is just like, this is just like the main entry point. So this is how we're styling an interview right now. And I'm going to give you the tour first, and then we're going to run it and talk about it, because as with many generative AI things, it takes a long time. Like these APIs are not fast. So what we have, my second favorite podcast after yours is Software Engineering Daily. And it's because I'm nerdy in private as I am in public. And
do you know, bizarrely in a related, I don't think I ever mentioned this, there's a company that produces voice training data for AI systems, and it's been trained on my podcast.
Has it really? All right. I actually meant if I had a little bit more time, I'd have been like, Chris, give me a transcript from your podcast and we'll do it live.
If you go and have a look on YouTube, I do have a recent video with Mac Whisper, and you can see me messing around with that on the last interview, actually. So anyway, carry on.
All right. But we'll do that sometime. It'll be fun. So they for my, to my great benefit, they have podcasts of many of their episodes. So this is like my test data set. It's a pretty good test data set. So what you can do, and I can go into details on this if you want, I can hit this extract topics button, and it'll perform a topic analysis on the content of that conversation. And it will find all of the most related text, group it all together, and then write a summary of it. So like let's look at data science and machine learning at DoorDash. Raghav Ramesh, a data science and software engineer at DoorDash, explains the process of rolling out a new version of machine learning model, which includes backtesting.
Do you know what? Actually, I put on my to-do list after playing around with Mac Whisper, investigate AI for show notes.
Well,
I think you have a customer already, so there we go.
I was hoping actually that I was going to get some podcasters at customers, because like this does a pretty nice job, and like
yeah.
It's like 80 to 90% accurate. You'll have to take a pass on it after it gets done, And then I'll also have to give you some length controls, but this is like 90% of the job of show notes.
Yeah. It's interesting. There's a few that sort of have it already, including what we're doing at the moment, which is Riverside. They have elements of it, but they tend to be either like all or nothing, whereas this is somewhere in the middle, which is you don't want an entire transcript. That's boring to well, you do, but not for the same purposes as show notes. Show notes is not the same as a transcript.
Yes.
And then just bullet points is also not always quite enough to warrant, whereas this is kind of like a nice, and if you could somehow, this is going into a very specific use case, but if you could somehow tie it to like chapters or position markers in the audio or something, that would be really cool. But that's a whole other level, I think.
Well, we'll talk about that in a minute. So like this, so yeah, and then here's the deal, like this little magnifying glass will then take that topic and split it into subtopics. And like my intent here is, I think with a lot of these generative AI tools, it's like you said, it's like all or nothing. You're going to go in here and you're going to feed it a paragraph, a prompt, and then it's going to whack you out, whatever, 2,000 words of average schlock in most cases, not to be mean about generative AI tools. But that's what you're getting a lot because it's trained on the mean. So what you get is the mean. You get average shit.
And you've used a software one here. So how did you go with, I mean, I don't see enough text here, but what I do see seems accurate relating to probably the topic that's being discussed. But all of them I've tried. We talk about Kubernetes, even my nickname, Chris Chinchilla, it usually gets wrong. And they all get wrong in slightly different ways. But yeah. So
this thing, what I would like, so for the actual topic analysis part, I am not using generative AI. I am using a combination of vector embeddings, and it's called the Louvain community detection algorithm, which detects similarities in large networks of data. So I'm not using AI to identify the topics, but what I do is I then group all of the text content together according to the topics that it's discovered, and then provide you with a summary of all that text content.
Huh. Interesting. You could also maybe start creating, I don't know if you're familiar with tools like Obsidian and Logsec and Roam that let you do these kind of mind maps of your content. You could start to auto-generate some of those. That would be cool as well, because obviously it only works on things that you define yourself. But of course, if it can auto create some of them as well, that could also be interesting. There's a lot that you could try here. Actually, I think that's half the problem sometimes, isn't it? Anyway,
there's a lot to unpack, buddy. There's a lot to unpack.
Carry on.
So we then take this and. You can slice into it to whatever level of detail you want. I've left this number here is the token count of the text, which
okay.
It's sort of abstract, but it's intended to give you some idea of like what did we talk about a lot and what did we how much did we talk about this in this conversation?
So architecture components and machine learning infrastructure was bizarrely not much.
Right?
Yeah. Actually, this is also interesting to see. You can actually see that as it gets through, they get shorter. They're running out of time.
Well, this is not temporal. Like this is not necessary. That's part of this thing is it's not temporal. Okay, it's like if I find you talking about the delivery process and machine learning at the beginning and the end of the conversation, those get grouped together.
Oh, okay.
So anyway.
The edit and the wastebasket, that's for editing or deleting sections, I guess.
It just deletes it. So like that'll just get rid of a topic from the outline.
Yeah. Cool. Okay.
So then if you mash this, and by the way, for y'all technical writers, I did give you a markdown export here.
Actually, I haven't met any of them that do that. Often the output of a lot of these transcript tools is the worst part. Well, it's just like wall of text,
Yeah, I know.
This is a little at the moment, but
it's a little wall of texty. But we'll talk about this. Is one of my features, which we'll talk about in a minute. So
cool.
if you mash write document, it will iterate through all of these topics, and it will self-research the conversation to find the most relevant content to the topic. It will pass that in as context, and it will prompt GPT to write a section of text about that topic.
Yeah, yeah.
And it is still kind of a wall of average schlock, which I'll talk about this. Like, one of my major features that I want to add is length controls. Yeah. So like, what I want you to be able to say is, okay, I want 1,000 words, and I want this much of it to be in each of these topics. Hit write document, and I want it to show you a planner. So I want to do like lorem ipsum with the lengths that you have defined, so you can slide things around and look at it and be like, okay, this looks like the way I want it to come out.
Yeah.
And then you hit write document, and then it goes through each heading, researches the heading, which sends the prompt off to GPT and writes the content. It's the idea.
Okay.
So any questions before well, actually, I'm going to start running it, and then we can like talk about stuff. So I'm just going to delete everything. And it's a fairly young application, but I've got some nice, like, it's fairly observable and usable here. Like, it'll sort of tell you what's going on as we go through. Everything does take a long time.
Yep, they do at the moment. Yeah. Are you running this locally or remotely as well?
This is my staging host. So I have this deployed into staging. I got, a couple of users on it that are kicking it around. It's been going fairly well. I don't have I don't have bugs back yet. So I know people aren't in there heavily. How's that? Okay. So that's what now it's done with the community detection, and it's created.
So this is doing it from the transcript though, not the actual audio.
Correct.
Okay.
Although in my V1 product, what I'll wind up doing is we're going to ingest all this stuff from your from OpenPhone. And the thing about OpenPhone is that they don't have call transcription built in. So when I ingest the call recordings, I'm running those through the Whisper API and transcribing them into I have this general purpose conversations model that I'm using to represent all of, the text messages and the phone calls. And that brings you back all of this stuff with, and so we're done here. We've got now these 5 topics. So I'm going to slice down the top one. So when we bring all that stuff back over, I'm going to do similar stuff in the main product that I'm doing over here. Like the first feature I want to ship over there is temporal summaries. So what I figure people will be interested in seeing is like, okay, I'm running this business. I want to know what we said to our customers every day and every week and every month and every quarter. And I want to be able to go in and look at this corpus, this text corpus of this conversation, and be able to zoom in and out to the level of detail that I want. And for example, I want to be able to click on, this daily summary and for it to zoom me to that part of the conversation. And it's not only reasonable and feasible, but I think it's useful to do the same thing with topic analysis. So you have this conversation and you want to split it down into 10 topics or whatever. And then you want to be able to click on that topic and have it explain to you the references. Like, where did you find people talking about this topic in this text corpus? Yeah. And then also to your point, think about, okay, I'm going to take this conversation and I'm going to do topic analysis on it. And then I'm going to take this conversation and do topic analysis on it. And then I'm going to feed that list of topics over to an AI solution. And it's going to be like, oh, I think these topics are related. Do you want to merge them together? And then you can take like whatever, your 5 or 10 Zoom calls about, like, let's say, for example, you're doing interviews with users about product requirements, and then you're going to run topic analysis on those. And then you're going to run those topics through an AI tool, and it's going to be like, these are the ones you should merge together. And then you can use this magic to start developing correlations between different conversations with different customers or even different product managers. And like, we're getting into really powerful stuff, man.
If I wanted to continue going from here, say that exploring machine learning tooling, if you click the magnifying glass, it'll break that down even further. Well, yeah. And I'm sort of fascinated to know how far you could go before it just runs out
like
the specificity.
Breaks completely. You have to
breaks, I guess it would just start like analyzing the and a or something. Maybe, I'm not sure. But
it does actually. It's a funny thing with this network detection algorithm. If you feed it, I have found this running it on my local. If you feed it too short of and like, let's do it. You're going to make me break my product on live TV.
There we go.
Yeah. That's the worst one to break down. But yeah, eventually it will actually break. So if you feed this network detection algorithm too short of an input and too many topics, it'll just sit there forever and it'll never come back.
Reasonable, yeah. That seems reasonable, yeah. Oh, so it doesn't just keep getting smaller and smaller. It just breaks. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Eventually.
Interesting.
So you have to like put in some controls to keep that from, that from breaking down.
And this new topic button, is that to make it like manually or?
So it is. When I originally added this, when I originally created this, I was still in the mode that like, you're going to have to automatically create or you're going to have to manually create your outline to get a good output from the tool. Okay. That was before I had figured out that I could just do this like subtopic analysis to get better outlines than you can get from generative AI. Interestingly enough.
And what's the longest you've tried here?
So my business partner, who's helping me with the marketing side of things, took like a 2-hour and 45-minute podcast and pumped it in here with a low number of topics. And, because I'm early here and because I am in this like product that I accidentally sold, I haven't implemented the token chunking algorithm yet. So like in my main line, in my V1 product, I have, and it's an interesting problem when you're setting up natural language pipelines, is chunking. You would not think that like figuring out how you're going to split up this text would be complicated. Dude, it's super complicated. Like, do you split it up? Like the initial example I worked on, the guy was like, I'm going to split it into 5-sentence chunks with 1-sentence overlap because I'm thinking that one, 5 sentences contain, and I'm like, that's a broad assumption, dude.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So like you have to kind of figure out how to chunk things out correctly to maintain the most amount of context when you pass it into the. So all that's to say, if you feed too long of a transcript here with too low of a number of topics, it will exceed the context window and break. But I have code written to handle the chunking. It's just that, it depends on whether paying customers hit this bug, whether I fix it or not, or whether I just say wait for V1 because it's in V1 already.
And so this is a podcast which, to be fair, is edited and semi-scripted, et cetera, with regards to the initial application here with phone calls where people will and ah and mumble and speak in a very different sort of way. How's that ended up working for the phone calls?
So I have not yet used generative AI on a large data set of conversations from the business, but I have used it on technical interviews for my current job, and my perception so far is that it does a reasonably good job. In terms of NLP, what you're describing are called stop words, and stop words are basically things that have no meaning for the conversation, and you can actually potentially just remove all stop words as part of your natural language pipeline before you send it into your stuff. But I have sort of gone on the idea that, like, okay, I'm not going to make these assumptions yet that, like, we need to get rid of the stop words. I'm just going to let them in the context window and see what happens. It is definitely more difficult. And I'll tell you where I think the difficulty of solving that part of the problem lies is in the transcript preparation. Because what I found with my first pass is that if I just took the raw transcript and I fed it in, it was completely wrong.
Yeah, I think that's something. And also, I can see you've got in the transcript, and you must be extracting it lots of like the time stamps and the names of people and things like that. I'm guessing you're extracting a lot of that, throwing it away for the time being.
So in my case, I had originally, because some of my original formats had the timestamp and speaker information on one line, so I would strip out that information. But I decided to also stop doing that, and like what I'm doing in here is really basic. I'm looking for 2 hard returns in a row, and I split it on 2 hard returns in a row, and that's my chunk. Okay. It's really basic assumptions for this because, once again, like I like literally tripped on the rug in the bathroom and sold this software. Like I did not mean this. The only reason this is a thing is because people bought it.
I hope you're okay to be admitting that in a public place, but yeah.
I want you to put it in the podcast. It's funny.
So I think you've covered this a lot kind of in the conversation, but let's say it's just a question I always ask towards the end, so I don't really know what else not to ask. You've got a lot of things you could do. What will you do next? What do you think will be the most useful? And I guess there's a question for something like this that you just tripped on the bath mat. How will you decide what you think is going to be the most useful next feature?
So what I really hope, the part of the reason why I have stopped developing on the V1 app and spent a lot of effort over here is because this is an actual avenue for me to get traction, users, and feedback. And so I have made an assumption on the V1 product of what will be useful. Here's my hypothesis. That so here's the approach that I'm taking with the main line of the Discuss It app. I'm going to build a core model that represents conversations in multiple different channels: phone calls, text messages, chats, emails, whatever else you can come up with. And it represents that in a consistent model. I'm going to build adapters that ingest conversational data from multiple sources: Slack, Zoom, phone system, Gmail, etc. Then I'm going to build tools that allow you to analyze, summarize, make sense of, and write content about the conversational data that you have ingested into the system. The first tool that I had planned to release was the temporal summarizer. Daily, weekly, monthly, etc. summaries of conversations with people. I think that's super useful, and I think people will buy that. This isn't what you're looking at here. It's actually like 2 of the tools, right? It's the topic analyzer tool, and it's a writing assistant tool. So what I will release in V1 is I'll finish the temporal. Well, actually, I may not even finish the temporal summarizers. I may wind up just writing the thing that ingests everything from OpenPhone and does call transcription, because OpenPhone, I can send that for OpenPhone users, and I can send it for free because as long as they bring their own OpenAI key, it doesn't cost me anything for them to get in there and get these.
Yeah. Actually, you've hit upon a very interesting aspect for a lot of people thinking about running businesses on OpenAI tools. Is the cost is actually quite expensive, and where do you put it? Do you put it in the hands of the customer, which they might then really reevaluate whether it's worth it? Or if you put it in the hands of you, the provider, how do you maintain something that is financially viable for you? It's actually something that gets forgotten about a lot. We're looking into this for the kind of docs search and things like that. And once you kind of start doing the back of the envelope maths, you realize actually it's quite expensive.
It's quite expensive.
Is it worth it? Like, all these cool features are very cool, but is it worth the cost? If you're looking at like thousands of usage per month, that can be a lot of money.
It can be a lot of money.
And even if you run it yourself, that's still, a company like OpenAI is probably already doing things on the cheap because of various reasons. Doing it yourself, you still need to, in theory, have the same levels of computing power and stuff like that. And that's an interesting thing. It comes back to that whole blockchain conversation ages ago again, where I was like, great, but is it worth the effort?
Is it worth the effort? Because all of they all take a huge amount of compute power to operate. Like there's no way around it. And I'll tell you this, Chris, I have done everything, and even my staging product is running on a free OpenAI key. And I am writing. So, for example, with my like processing here, I'm writing it in such a way that I will be able to either do sequential or concurrent processing, because I kind of understand that economically, if I can get you this thing and you can stay on the free key, and basically the way that you stay on the free key is by not sending concurrent requests. So if I get 5 users and they're all on their own free API key and they're all running sequential requests instead of parallel ones, I can help you keep the cost under control. I can do all your call transcription for free, and it doesn't make a difference to me because like the access to the generative tool is your problem, not mine.
Yeah.
And so that keeps things under control.
I think we'll see, of course, in the future if that kind of thing will continue to be allowed, or we get a similar outcome as we've seen with things like Twitter and Reddit, where they're like, "Oh,
you got to pay." Yep.
Free ride's over now.
Well,
very clever, but the free ride's over.
Yes. Yeah. I have two sort of. So here are my, and you're right. Like either I can carry this and charge for the privilege of managing your cost to this API and managing your security and privacy of data. Yeah. You can pay me to do that. That's an option. The other option is that I allow it to be your problem. So you figure out your API costs. You figure out your security and data privacy. And all I'm going to do is call the API that you tell me to call. Yeah. So if it's, as long as people come in, what I'm interested to see is if the competitors to OpenAI release compatible REST APIs, because if that's the case, then you can be like, I've stood up my own generative API service on my infrastructure. Here's the endpoint to call. It's going to support these contracts, and we're going to be the masters of our own destiny. My preference is that the world decides that we are all going to be the masters of our own destiny in terms of artificial intelligence. We're going to figure out what models we use. We're going to front APIs in front of them. We're going to be in control of our own stuff. And we expect you as a vendor to conform to the way that we want to harness this power, not the way that you do. I think that's actually a better world, personally.
Yeah. We'll see, of course. Unfortunately, I have seen some discussions around this very topic, and especially looking at it from a slightly different perspective when you see statements like, "Oh, AI has taken 10,000 jobs" or whatever, and it's like, no, actually, the capitalist implementation of AI has taken away 10,000 jobs. The AI had nothing to do with it, really. Mm-mm. It's just that someone actually valued saving money over people's livelihood.
Yes.
So we unfortunately know that companies like to have their own little silos and things. But I think something that is very different in this particular case, which was not the case, and I'm going to use the example of blockchain just because it was the last kind of big hype cycle, but it was a hype cycle that very few people really understood.
Yeah.
And understood how to use and understood the benefits, and that's a whole other conversation. But with this, it's been a hype cycle that the common person is using it, gets it, understands it. And I think that may change the dynamic. We'll see.
It for sure does. But I have a hot take, and I'm going to give it to you.
All right, go for it.
Okay. I don't know if you're aware of how they train large language models.
Vaguely. It's a topic that I have looked into and actually fascinates me as well. So NLP is something that fascinates me. But go on, give us a chat GPT, explain it like I'm 5 summary.
They take a corpus of text. They mask words in the text. Mm-hmm. They say, model, what word goes here? And then it tells the model whether it got the word right or not. That's the innovation. Yep. So I want to be really clear here. We are talking about artificial intelligence models that are really good at playing Mad Libs.
Yeah. I think
and it's the rise of the machines around here, y'all. Come on, give me a break.
I think this is something a lot of people have tried to point out. It's like, it's not that clever. It just feels like it at the moment. And actually, I mean, and I don't know. I think I wrote this a little while ago that maybe we overestimate human intelligence sometimes.
I was reading this article today by this guy, and he was like, here's how I use ChatGPT to teach myself how to play board games. And the quote that I zeroed in on was, and you can use the plugin to talk to your PDF. And I'm like, guy, you have no idea what you're talking about. You're completely uneducated. Like, all the people who are talking the most about artificial intelligence don't know anything about it. Like, it's amazing to me the level of uneducation on this topic.
Yeah, and that can lead, of course, to the problems we just discussed of, oh, well, let's replace all these people and blah, 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 because it's something that's really not understood very well. Yeah, it's a good point.
It's not. We've replaced 10,000 jobs with a machine that plays Mad Libs. Guys, what are you doing?
There's the quote.
Anyway, that's my hot take.
We could argue that a lot of workers in the past were just playing solitaire and Minesweeper, but anyway.
They were, but, you know.
All right. John, if you want to get some more customers on this, where can people find more about you or discuss it? Yeah.
So you can find me on.
Find more?
You can find me on LinkedIn. My name's John Davenport. Mm-hmm. My organization is on LinkedIn. It's called Discuss It, one word. Mm-hmm. The website address will be discussit.app. We are so early that we don't even have a postage stamp website. But keep an eye here. We're going to be releasing some really interesting. Tools for understanding conversational data. We want to be the de facto conversation intelligence platform for business. So look forward if you're, I also find it interesting. I've been trying so hard to ship products for technical writers for years. None of my first 3 customers are for technical writers, even though this thing was explicitly created for technical writers. So come on down. I really want to help this audience out. I'm not sure that I will be successful, though.
Yeah, I'd have to could give it a go. I think you definitely need to hook into something like Zoom or et cetera, to get that, whatever people are using for those interviews and things like that. But we could talk after I've hit the stop recording button. But it's good to have you on. All right, John. So John Davenport on LinkedIn to find Discuss It, and good to finally have a conversation that we managed to sort of unpack something functional, and good to talk to you. So
yeah, I think
thanks very much for joining me.
Last time we were fixing a Python on Macintosh. It was delightful.
Yeah, we just got nowhere. Gave up. But
thanks for having me, Chris.
And that was my conversation, my nerd out with John. A few things from me. I did publish on Medium this macOS native artificial intelligence applications. I have a video version of that in the editing bay right now. In the meantime, I've looked at Starlight from Astro, their new docs focused sub-project of Astro for documentation sites. I looked at new features in macOS Sonoma and creating text adventures with Quest. Those are all over on YouTube. And that's pretty much it. I've been a little bit busy with various other projects the past couple of weeks. Not too much more to add. My website continues to get some updates. You'll see some new sections there. All my books are mostly all there now. Overhauling the podcast page as we speak. And some new book releases coming soon. I'm just having some artwork made. I think that's about it for now, to be honest with you. Also, all I can remember anyway. So I'll be back in a couple of weeks with another episode. And until then, I have been Chris Chinchilla, and thank you very much for joining me. Take care, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the show. Find out more about me at chrischinchilla.com, where you can find show notes, sign up for my newsletter, and find all of my writing, games, work, and video links. There's also details on how to get in touch with me. And if you want to get even closer to what I do, join my Discord server for behind-the-scenes discussions and helping me produce my shows and work.